Rambam writes, so if you speak to him that way, that he'll merit a share in the world to come, and what's at stake if he violates and he does not go in the right direction. So if he accepts, fine. You've done yours. You fulfilled your obligation of informing your fellow what he has to know. In kibel mimenu mutav. If your fellow accepted what you said, it's good. Vimlo. What about if he says, I'm not interested? Not interested. Yochenu pam shniyo. You have to tell him again. Ushlish is the third time. Vrein tomid, continuously. You have to tell him he's doing the wrong thing. You don't let up. To what point? Until literally the sinner, he becomes physical with you. He says, you come back one more time, I'm going to strike you. Once he says that already, it's a whole different story. He says, I told you once, twice, three times, I'm not interested. And you come back one more time, you're going to regret it. So if the sinner threatens the one who's trying to set him right, then you leave it at that. You've done yours. You don't have to do more than that. Now, there's an expression, you don't leave a stone unturned. So what's considered leaving no stone unturned? You never know. But it reaches that point where he's already reacting that he's going to strike you. If you continue, you're on his case, then you fulfilled your obligation. Now, there's a Gemara in a certain location, Shavuos. One who has the ability to intercede, to protest the person's behavior, and he doesn't. He sits by and lets the person do what he does. Who nitfas ba'avon elu. He's actually held culpable for the sins of these people. Why? Well, since you could have made a difference and you did not make the difference, or even if you didn't, but remaining silent is condoning something which is unacceptable. Since he could have protested, he could have stated his position, and he did not. Therefore, he's held accountable for their sins. So simply because if you would have interceded, it may have made a difference. That the transgression wouldn't have taken place. So why did you remain silent? It's a condonement of that. Therefore, the person who remained silent, where he could have, he's held accountable. Because he failed in the area which he was obligated to intervene, and he did not. That's the concept. We find that after 40 days after we received the Torah at Sinai, the Jews got involved with a golden calf. Only a handful of people worshiped the golden calf, but yet the Jewish people in its entirety were held accountable for the golden calf. Why? So one of the commentators, the Sepharno, explains, if it's a minority and the vast majority were opposed to it, they should have stopped it in its tracks. They should have nipped it in its bud. They shouldn't have allowed it. But they remained silent. With such a spiritual travesty is taking place, you remain silent. You know what that silence is? That silence is a condonement of something which is unacceptable at every level. That's what we were held culpable. Not that the Jews themselves actually worshiped the golden calf, but to allow such a disgraceful act take place in the midst of Jewish people, with a vast majority, they were outnumbered, these people, and you did not quelch it. Therefore, God says it's as if you participated in the idolatry because you condoned it, because you could have prevented it from happening. What was the atonement? Moshe Rabbeinu says, after he breaks the tablets, and he says, whoever is for God, come with me. And they began killing the idolaters. The tribe of Levi, every member of the tribe of Levi joined with Moshe Rabbeinu when he said, Mila Shemel, who's for God, come with me. Every member of the tribe of Levi went and was involved in punishing the idolaters. If the condonement is an indication that that behavior was acceptable, the tribe of Levi was the minority of the Jewish people, was the smallest tribe. The Jews, they remained silent and allowed Levi with Moshe to do what they had to do. So just as initially the level of liability and culpability was due to their silence, when this travesty was taking place, when it was being corrected through the expungement of this evil, and they remained quiet again, that means they were actually, it was condoned, it was correct, it should be corrected. So the second silence was a correction on the first silence. That's how the Sforno learns. Because if you could make a difference, you don't make a difference, you're held accountable. You have that liability. The concept, and we discussed yesterday, mind your own business. No medal in my life has no relevance here. We once mentioned the name of the Ramak, or Moshe Cordovero. The Jewish people are one entity, one spiritual system. Anybody does anything which is negative, it compromises the whole system. The soul is compromised. Everybody's taken down. Therefore, what you do, I have what to say about it. For instance, talk modern day terms. A person has a factory and the chimney pollutes the whole neighborhood. So the person says, look, when the smoke goes up, I have the air rights to go straight up. The wind carries it away. What do you mean the wind carries it away? But factually, your pollution is poisoning the atmosphere. Therefore, I have what to say about it. But I'm doing it on my premises. It's relevant you're doing it on premises, but your behavior is affecting all of us. Since every Jewish soul is interconnected with every other Jewish soul, when you bring something negative into the system, you actually compromise the system. The whole system is compromised. That means every Jewish soul is compromised because of the misbehavior or the transgression of one Jew. Therefore, that's not called meddling. I'm intervening because the consequences to me. That's the reason. Why the person can't say, no, just stay out of my life. What you're doing, it's all of us. It's like a person lights a fire in his apartment and he's going to put the building on fire. He says, well, I'm lighting the fire on my premises. Yeah, but you realize that fire is going to spread out of your premises and take the whole building down and put everybody's life and everybody's property in jeopardy. They stop him immediately, even if they have to force him to extinguish the fire. That's what it is. Because we're all going to be victims of this one person's misbehavior, irresponsible behavior. And your coworker is a Jew, and they order up a McDonald's burger for lunch, right? And he's a nice person, and you have a relationship with him. And the person doesn't realize that he's not permitted to eat that. It's not kosher for many reasons. The meat is not kosher. Cheese is not kosher. It's a combination of milk and meat, many things. And the man eats his lunch at his desk, and you're aware of it. Or you're aware when he goes to a restaurant, which is not a kosher restaurant. And he spoke about what he ordered off the menu, which was something not kosher. And you don't say a word. How do you not say a word? I'm not telling you to check everybody's activities, what he's frequenting during his lunch break. This man shares with you, or you're aware, what exact, do you say a word? Based on our obligation as Jews, we should say something. Especially if you have a relationship where there's a chance he may listen, and even though he hasn't changed his behavior today, that you put the thought in his mind is someday he may act on the information that you're sharing with him. You know, as people get older, it's easier to take control of your life. You're young, you satisfy your desire on the moment. As you get older, that's not what you realize life's not all about that. So what you tell him today, someday it may resonate with him, and the person, that information you shared with him may make a difference in his decision in the future. So how do you not say anything? If actually he's doing the wrong thing, and you're being affected by that, even though he's doing it inadvertently because he's unaware of the seriousness of what he's doing, but it has a consequence, how do you not say anything? Right? And most people don't. No. Why should I hurt a good relationship? We're not saying you should hit the man over the head. You can introduce it, as he said, speak softly, slowly, with a positiveness, and you do your best. That's the way you do it. The person say, I'm not ready for it yet. I'm not there yet. Okay? So you discuss other things. Good thing you came after being late. It's a good thing you came back late. Okay. Just to make that point. I'm giving you a little muscle to be on time next time. Okay. So we say, initially, when you admonish, rebuke, inform a person is doing the wrong thing, it shouldn't be with harshness, with sternness, to the point where you're going to embarrass him. You should not bring sin upon him. Like you're barraging him with all kinds of claims. It's very interesting. People, they say they mean well. And they speak to a person, they destroy him. And they said, but you realize this is constructive criticism. Yeah. Would you like to be spoken that way? There's nothing more destructive than the way you're speaking to this person. But the person always says, no. I mean it with good intention. I have no access to grind here. I don't want to in any way lord over this person. Now, I once told a story with the Chofetz Chaim. We think that most Jews in Europe were observant. They were not. They did not keep Shabbos. And they did many other things. Why? They were ignorant. And even if they were aware, but still, because they weren't learned, they weren't careful in many areas. And this is in Poland. So every Shabbos, the Chofetz Chaim would send out one of his oldest students to visit a small village, and these villages couldn't afford a rabbi. On Rosh Hashanah and Kippur, they would travel to the largest city to pray the large minyan, but they couldn't afford a rabbi, and they didn't study, so they were ignorant. So he would send one of his elderly students. He should be the rabbi for the weekend, for Shabbos, the Shabbos rabbi. And every time they would go, and he'd send out, let's say, 10 students in different communities, 10 different villages, and he would speak about something that they weren't aware of, to inform them, and by teaching them, this will cause them to be more committed, knowing what their responsibilities are. So he sends this student of his to a certain town, and he speaks about Shabbos, the observance of Shabbos. And after Shabbos, they ran this guy out on a rail. Yeah, they ran him out on the rail. He gets back to Radin. The Chofetz Chaim says, so how was Shabbos? He says, I would never go back to them. These people have no appreciation. Here I give up my Shabbos to try to be their rabbi, their Shabbos rabbi, and this and that. And they treated me like a dog. They literally ran me out on a rail. He says, why? He says, I don't know why. He says, let me ask you a question. Chofetz Chaim says, tell me exactly how you gave them Musar. How did you teach them? Tell me exactly. So he gives a blow-by-blow account of exactly how he delivered the sermon. Fire and brimstone. Fire and brimstone. That the window shuddered from it. So Chofetz Chaim says to him, is there a wonder why they ran you out on a rail? Do you deserve to be run out on a rail? Why did you go to tell them they were doing the wrong thing? Because there's a mitzvah, I would just quote it, you should inform your fellow when he's doing the wrong thing. He says, when you put on your tefillin, which is a mitzvah, do you put on your tefillin with fire and brimstone? You put it on with love, with feeling, with positiveness. So when you go and you inform your fellow Jew that he's doing the wrong thing, do you do it with fire and brimstone? Like there's an avalanche coming down on his head, where the person feels barraged and come upon, or you do it with gentleness and love. And nothing negative in it. Therefore, he says, you did the wrong thing. You deserve to be run out on a rail. The people, they get caught up, they have a fervor. They're avenging God's honor. We're not only avenging God's honor. These people don't know any better. They're ignorant. They go slow. They should all be observant. Since when are you dictating what life should be or should not be? It all emanates to a degree even from the arrogance of the person who's giving the Muslim. And he says, therefore, you have to be careful. When you give the Muslim, you should not embarrass the person, even if you're speaking to him one-on-one. Definitely if you're speaking to him in a public setting. You're not permitted to embarrass a Jew, fellow Jew. Therefore, one has to be so careful not to embarrass his fellow in a public setting, whether he's a person of lesser stature, whether he's a person of greater stature. You have to be careful. You have to be sensitive to the other person's honor. You shouldn't call him a name, an appellation, which he's embarrassed from. What does that mean? There's certain names that are very pejorative names. And the Gemara tells us that one who uses that, he actually he forfeits his share in the world to come. Because by using that name, you're embarrassing him. So the commentators explained, sometimes the person gets, even though initially it's pejorative, person gets used to a name. And he doesn't feel come upon or negative because of it. I'll give you an example. Years ago, people used to have different kind of nicknames for people. They would say, hey, Chubby, come over here. The person was called Chubby all his life. Today he's 60 years old. They still call him Chubby, although they call him Chubby when he's 5 years old. But factually, it's a reference, it's an appellation which is not respectful. You're not permitted. Or you say, hey, Sonny boy. Because when he was a little boy, they called him Sonny. So now he's a prize fighter, they call him Sonny Liston. You got it? Sonny. But for a regular person, where you're opposed to that, you have a name you would prefer to be called by your name, not Sonny. You're not no longer a 5-year-old child. You're not permitted to call that person Sonny unless he says, I want you to call me Sonny. Otherwise, it's not respectful to that person. This is the law. There was a person on the Lower East Side many years ago. He had a houseware store, and he had his face looked like a mouse, And everybody used to say on the Lower East Side, we're going to shop at the Mouse's store, and they used to call him Mousy. That's what they called him. Could you imagine? After he called Mousy for so many years, he wasn't taken aback. He made peace with the name. He's Mousy. Somebody says, should I call him exterminator? He says, no, that don't call. It's okay. But you're not permitted. It's a Torah violation. It's a Torah violation. Because that's presenting him in a light which is not respectful. You have no right to do that. Definitely, if you're going to cause him embarrassment. Definitely not. I told him a story a few weeks ago, I'm sure you remember. Many years ago, I used to say a lecture at Yad Avram on 63rd Street every other week, Wednesday nights. And I spoke about the concept of chesed, hospitality, and how important it is, hospitality, that Hashem values hospitality even more than Kabbalas Pnei Hashchina, even more than accepting the divine presence, because we find Avram Avinu, that when he was engaged with a communication with Hashem, he interrupted it to host the angels. So evidently we see if Avram interrupted his communication with God, evidently hospitality is even greater. And I expanded it, elucidated, cited sources and everything. At the end of the lecture, the room was packed from wall to wall. And there was a person in the back, and he says to me, so why do religious people not do hachnosas orchim? That's the way he asked the question. Hachnosas orchim means hospitality. So why do religious people not do hachnosas orchim? The way he pronounced the word "hachnosas orchim," those words, I knew his background was he was raised religious, observant, because you don't have that kind of pronunciation. So I said to him, in the presence of 125 people, I said, "You're a liar. What you're saying is false and a lie. And what you're doing is you're slandering the religious community, because there's nobody more philanthropic and more hospitable than observant Jews. They open their homes every Shabbos to people if they need a place to stay. And you're saying they don't do it? You're a liar." Okay? Comes up to me afterwards. He says, you embarrassed me publicly. You're supposed to be a rabbi. How do you embarrass me publicly? Exactly what we're talking about now. So I said, I want to ask you a question. You come from a religious background. You went to yeshiva. What you're today, I don't know what you're today. Knowing that all these people here come from secular backgrounds, and they don't know what the religious Jew is, what the religious Jew is or not, and you come out with that kind of statement. How detrimental that statement is. You're slandering an innocent community. They're going to take it as fact. Therefore, I had to respond. So you say, I embarrassed you? I said, no, you embarrassed yourself. Because you spoke in a way which was unacceptable, and it had to be immediately addressed and dismissed. Therefore, so I didn't embarrass you. I didn't embarrass you. You embarrassed yourself. Here we're talking about you embarrass the person. You can speak to him with softness, with gentleness. And you go and you speak to him sternly, harshly, in a way that you take away his human dignity. That's already, you've compromised the person. You have no right to do that. In front of Davshu Boshmenu. This happens. I remember when I was a little kid. Then I grew up to be a very good boy, a very good student. When I was maybe 5 years old, I may have been wild. And I meet these two women, and I'm already about 15, 16 years old. And already I've learned quite a bit. And I'm mature beyond 16 years old when I was 16. And these women say in the crowd, they say, we remember him. He was a wild kid. He was this and that. I was embarrassed. You understand? They didn't mean it in a bad way. I'm no longer a 5-year-old child. And they're depicting me as something which they couldn't believe I could be that same person. It's embarrassing. So to say anything, although you don't mean anything bad, which is going to cause embarrassment to the other person, you're not permitted to do it. Two people are Bali Tshuva. He says, don't you remember what we used to do before we became religious, what we used to do? The man's embarrassed. You're not permitted to share it. You're not permitted to say it. Because he's embarrassed because of his past behavior. He doesn't want to hear about it. That's only area between Adam and Chaver. Divrei Shamayim in lo chazabo b'seiser. If the man didn't do tshuva, he's still behaving the same way. Machlimim also berabim. You permitted even to embarrass him. Years ago, there was somebody by the name of Irving Mahler. He was a very fine man. He was a Syrian Jew. If he'd be alive today, he was the same age as Mr. Glick. And he was a very fine person. He used to come to Yad Avram, learn with us, daven with us, and he was a very successful businessman. He was in the baby clothing business. They were all in what they used to call shmatas, all the Syrians. And he told me his father was a businessman, but he came over from Aleppo. He was the son of a rabbi, so he was a shochit. He would do, on the side, not for a livelihood. People needed kosher meat. Came over in the 20s, and he would slaughter chickens that people should have kosher meat, kosher, birds for Shabbos. So there was a club in Brooklyn where the Syrians, they would get together and they would play whatever. They play chess, they play checkers, and it was fixed up very nicely. They were Syrians. Even then, they were successful. and all of a sudden, in the middle of they're playing checkers on Shabbos, which is okay. There's a holdup. Somebody comes in and says, everybody empty their pockets. Does anybody know what's in anybody else's pocket? Everybody thought they're basically observant people. All of a sudden, a person takes out a cigarette lighter from his pocket, takes out a pack of cigarettes, and the other people didn't know. The other person takes out his wallet from his pocket. Until then, everybody thought basically they observe Shabbos properly. Only then was the game up, so to say. But they were embarrassed. I mean, it was due to the holdup. So if somehow nobody knows that the person violates Shabbos, and you say, by the way, I hear some jingling in your pocket. You have change in your pocket. By the way, when you came to shul, when you got out of the cab, was it in front of the shul or a block away you got out? But it's nobody's business. What are you trying to accomplish? That's been Olam Mokum. That's between man and God. That has nothing to do with you. You have no right to do it. If you're doing it, so you should do tshuva, you do it privately. You don't do it publicly. Right? You're not permitted to embarrass him. But if a person did not do tshuva, you even have a right to embarrass him publicly. You're permitted to make it public knowledge, to force him, to compel him to do tshuva. You leave no stone unturned until he actually turns to the right path. Moshe also called the Israel. That's the way the prophets interacted with the Jewish people. The Syrians, they do things differently. Until about the Syrian community, there was a story not many years ago, a number of years ago, I was flying to the Ukraine on my way to Israel. I spent Shabbos in a certain community where the Alter Rebbe was buried. It's called Hadish in the Ukraine. And the one who owned the airlines was a Jew. He owned the Ukrainian Airlines. He was one of these billionaire oil people. And the one who arranged my ticket and the whole trip itinerary eventually to go to Israel was a friend of this person. So I flew in business class on this airlines, Ukrainian Airlines. And we're going there. 1 second. A group of Syrians, they're going to Uman, to Rav Nachman of Breslov. They went to Breslov, to his grave, where usually Rosh Hashanah, they have 30, 40,000 people going there. This group, they were going there. It was right before Pesach. It was between Purim and Pesach. So one of the people I knew, one of these Syrians, he says to me, I want to tell you a story. There was a certain young man, he was going to get engaged to a non-Jewish woman and marry her. And we spoke to him to try to convince him not to. He wouldn't listen. He said, we did? We kidnapped him. We took him away somewhere. And that was the end. That's the end. There's no way he's marrying her. They took the law in their own hands. They did what they had to do, because otherwise he would have married a non-Jew. In their community, a Jew should marry a non-Jew? No way. They will not allow it. And literally, forcibly, they kidnapped him, put him in a car, drove up to who knows where, and maybe to North Dakota, where they put him, till finally he came to his senses, came back, he became an observant Jew. Just no share with the FBI. It's a serious business. Okay. As they say, the FBI gets their man. They get their man also.